Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Classic Dune, and welcome back to Strategy Snapshots. I'm here with Mr. Nobody and Mellester joining us in the hot seat, answering some questions about his favorite factions and the various strategies that he employs.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me.
It's a
Of
pleasure.
course. So, so Malister, we've interviewed a couple people prior to
Mhm.
you, and typically Jade and I have kind of talked, and we've kind of agreed that the conversations get very, very interesting when we sort of target each player's kind of top two, top three favorite factions. So, of all the factions in the game, who would your top three be? You don't necessarily have to put them in order, but
Mhm.
once we figure that out, we're really going to kind of hone in on specific questions like from each of those factions' perspective.
All right. Well, it's always best to answer them just right on top of your head, not think too much about what your favorite factions are, because otherwise you are never done. So my favorite ones are the Emperor, Atreides, and the Bene Talaxu.
It's great that we coincidentally have them set up for us.
Yeah. So,
The Hollywood magic. Okay, so let's start with kind of basic line of questioning. So, question number one. Now that we know what your three favorite factions are, let's say that beginning of the game, whether you selected one or you randomly dealt one. So let's say for the sake
mhm.
of argument, we'll start with the BT. So you're dealt the BT.
Yep.
When you see that that is your faction, do you kind of go into a game of Dune with sort of a macro strategy?
Uh,
Um, if if so, can you go into detail about kind of what you're thinking? And we can take it for each of the three factions that we have out here in front of us. And if not, maybe kind of give some thoughts or some insights as to kind of like some things you're looking for, kind of as the game sort of unfolds.
yeah. Uh, Basically, every macro strategy has the macro goal of burning resources of your opponents. Like, so if
Interesting. Okay.
so
Yeah,
if
can you
I'm
go
the
into detail
BT,
about that?
if I'm in BT, for example, there is uh like for one, you wanna get people to burn their troop tokens and put them into Laxo tanks because that's where you have control over them and leaders. And that's where you want to focus on as a macro thing about just how do I make get my engine rolling quickly. That's just basically the standard BT macro strategy is how do I get my 6 spice a turn engine going as quickly as possible. Uh,
Oh,
that's
interesting.
that's a short term BT short term goal, but on a macro level, you always look at how do I get everybody in the tank success, so I have control.
Okay.
Uh,
What about from the Emperor's perspective?
the Emperor's perspective is it's the only faction that can really sit back and just enjoy the game. Like they there are lots of powerful factions in this game, but I find the Emperor just the most enjoyable to play because they are powerful and they're powerful in multiple ways, and they don't care about lots of things, and they allow you a level of flexibility. And I'm like, I just had a long way of work, a long day of work, a long day of sitting around doing you know trivial things. Now I can do sit around a Doom board and not and think about trivial things I can do to. Uh, as the Emperor, it is your pleasure to do stuff. Like you can allow your ally to do things. You can do things yourself. And the only thing you have to remember as the Emperor is make sure people are buying cards for high prices. That's like the only thing you have to remember as the Emperor.
Yeah, there's a reason why Emperor and Chome have earned the affectionate nickname of Hangover Dune when you're playing them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the
It's
Emperor
good to be the king.
especially is really like the perfect embodiment of potential energy. They're basically just an anvil hanging in the air, waiting to just drop on the board and cause some havoc.
Yeah,
I'm
just
gonna
to
say
like
something.
just to give like a visual reminder, right? Like if you compare, like, here's how I look at the Emperor, right? Like, if you compare Atreides to Emperor, Emperor has those 5 extra troops. As I think about it, sure, they're not exactly 5 extra
Hey,
troops,
wait.
but
Oh.
it's 5 extra strength you have as the Emperor. You don't have
Right.
every.
One of the
Right?
strongest abilities in the game, honestly.
Yep.
5 extra troops, basically.
That's
So
a
I'm gonna
quarter. That's a quarter. It's an entire quarter you have above everybody else. Right,
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
say
Nobody.
something, and we can revisit this comment later, but we
Mm-hmm.
can kind of put it in the back of our heads. But I personally think that the Emperor might be the most finely tuned, balanced faction in the game for kind of the reasons you just said, where it's like you can be a great ally, you can be proactive on your own, all of your powers basically like suit yourself, but you can also prove to be really useful for an ally. Like there's no faction in the game that if they're like, oh well, the Emperor's available, I really don't necessarily want to ally with them. Like there's always a reason to kind of send the banner this way, so to say. So but yeah, we can revisit that later. I don't want to spend too much time on that. Okay, what about from macro strategy from the Atreides perspective? And before we get into this, I always find it interesting that in my experience, there have been three different type of Atreides players. There have been the fast and loose Atreides players that are very willing to sell a lot of the bidding information for the cards for very cheap, just so they can get some kind of drip economy. There are those that absolutely refuse to sell any information, and they're only going to share, that secret information with their ally. And then there are those that leverage it in a much more kind of as needed sort of way. So instead of selling bidding information during the bidding phase, assuming they take very accurate and good notes, they can sell it to different factions sort of as
Mm-hmm.
the battlefield unfolds, as people are getting into battles, they can kind of reach out and try to make deals that way. With
Yeah.
Atreides, specifically with this bidding advantage, what has been your preferred method, if at all, of sharing this knowledge? And when do you do it, and when do you choose not to do it?
Well, you're talking for one about like the micro strategy of your bidding advantage, not a macro strategy in that sense, because
Mhm.
macro wise, there's a lot of things you can do as a tradies. But micro wise, it is really hard. For example, making deals costs time. Making good deals takes a lot more time. So uh, uh, there are always phases in a Dune game. I don't know if you're aware. You got like the early game. Uh, to take that's when the Ixians shine because they have info. Uh, Early game, Atreides doesn't have knowledge because half the cards in play he hasn't seen. Right? He
And
has
those are, of
not
Mhm.
course,
seen.
the pocket cards, the 6 that are
Yep.
dealt to everyone, which Atreides does not get to see.
And there are some really, really annoying players out there that refuse to ever play their pocket card, even if it costs them their strongest leader, even if it, like, sometimes not even for a win attempt, they play their pocket card. And they usually just they keep it and keep it until the reshuffle. And like just before the reshuffle or the turn before then they play it. So that's the early game of Atreides, right? It is where you're poor, you can go for a submarine strategy. It's called the old-fashioned submarine strategy, where you as Atreides, you make the executive decision that the polar sink is very nice this time of year, and you hide there. You can make the decision early game that those dastardly Harkonnen, I have 10, they have 10. Let's just cut it down to 3 each, where you just dump 7 forces on Harkonnen turn 1, get your quiz out Hadrak really freaking strong, and you just make sure it's a sort of even playing field, as they call it. I flip flop on the two. Like it really depends on like, oh hey, did it go up? Did I get a good pocket card or not? Did I sell info because one of the hardest thing to do as a Atreides is realize what impact your bidding advantage has on other people. For example, when I'm playing the Emperor, I always try and buy info from Atreides because what people bid when they know what the card is more valuable knowledge than just what cards they have. If, for example, as a Atreides, you sell info to the Emperor, and you see the Emperor bid 6 spice on a shield, you know their pocket isn't a shield.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa. If you're the Emperor and you bought a peak from Atreides, and Atreides is bidding 6 spice on a shield, you know they don't have a shield.
Right, right.
That's
So
honestly,
to be fair, just to
sometimes that is for me at least like 25% at least of the value in buying
Yep.
information from a tradies is to be able to kind of intuit what their hand might include. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I can't name the number of games where I've correctly guessed what the Atreides have just based on what they were bidding in previous turns because I knew the card and I knew they knew it. And I see, oh, they're not bidding high on a snooper, or oh, they're bidding really high on this shield, so I know they don't have one. So my projectile weapon just kills them.
Yep. And that makes card knowledge the double-edged sword that it is, which is why I always try to like, which is why the 1 spice per peak card is justified. For some people, it's like really freaking expensive. One spice to have look at one freaking card, but it is a double-edged sword. So like as the Emperor and the Guild, and like you're happy to pay it, pay it. Like it is so good to have that info, even just for your intuition, where you can like realize, oh, that person bought this one. Or let's say you saw a person buy a cheap hero or a worthless card, all right? Like if you know the Guild or um the Benetalaxu, if they bought a worthless card for 5 spice, right? You know they're not a threat. You know they're probably just gonna go somewhere and throw a fight to you and like get rid of the worthless card.
Mhm.
Uh,
Let me ask you this. Have you ever offered giving people free peeks in exchange for knowing what their pocket card is?
yes,
I love that deal.
not specifically the pocket though. I've done with the Ixions a lot, where I swap info with Ixions.
Okay.
Uh, I've had pocket deals, right, where, for example, yeah, I've done it with the Harkonnen ones where I just said, hey, man, you can get free peaks as long as you just show me every card you top deck. Mm.
All
I,
right.
I
Well,
always
I think
love
that's
seeing
pretty.
Atreides and Ixians in the same game because I think it's really funny depending on what their kind of idea of selling information is, it can be really funny.
Yep.
Sometimes you have two enterprising Ixians and Atreides players, and it just becomes a race to the bottom. And the
Yep.
Ixians are selling the entire card draw for 1 spice. You get to see all 6 cards that go up for a single spice, just so that the Atreides aren't making the money. And then other
It's
times it's like it's completely silent. Nobody's saying anything to anyone else. There's no information, but you know
yep.
that 2 players at the table have a serious amount of information on what the cards are. It's so interesting. I love it.
As actions, I think like if you play with games where people are allowed to take notes regardless of rules as intended, actions become a really fun faction to play with, for me at least. If you're not allowed to keep notes, it becomes a bit harder. But one of the things, for example, if there's an Harkonnen in the game, never bottom deck as actions. That's just my advice. You
Yeah.
you always wanna, even if it's a good card, you wanna put it on top of the deck so you know what cards are in play.
Yeah. Sooner or later, the Harkonnens are going to draw that one card they need to screw over your entire plan. And even if it is only a 1% chance, Eventually, it's gonna be one of those games where you put out Sater Pilru with your supposedly unblockable Mala pistol, and you get completely screwed over by the Harkonnen drawing a shield, randomly, quote unquote. But
Yeah.
you know what? You had the means to change that, and you didn't take it.
And
I
one thing to
love
note
Dune
though,
as a game where you can get too greedy. It's very intriguing
and
in that way.
one thing to note though is Atreides basic advanced game. So base factions, base treachery deck, no expansion stuff at all is a way different beast than all the expansions stuff that's been added. For example, Atreides, I like in our home games we play nowadays with a really limited truth trance because people have realized that a truth trance is a really specific Karama card that you can use to break Atreides, depending on what your table thinks truth trance should do. And
Yeah, I hate Truth Trance so much.
mhm.
Just because of its potential.
Well, little birdie told me that. Yeah, well, little birdie told me that some of that stuff's going to get cleaned up. So hopefully,
Oh,
hopefully,
I
moving
hope
forward, we'll
so.
have a lot more clarity on how it's going to
but
work,
the,
or how it should
but then
work, I should say.
But then also, of course, the other expansion cards that were added later, especially the Richess ones, oof, like those break Atreides. They break Atreides in a really meaningful way because it allows you to do things that just weren't possible in the original game. Like you have a hand limit of 4, so you can't have something more than a perfect hand unless, if that makes sense.
Unless you're
Like,
Chom.
Right, right.
yeah, unless you're Chum.
And again,
Chums,
one of the strongest abilities in the game is that 5 card hand limit,
yep,
especially for Chom.
that, that's Chum's biggest advantage, in my opinion, because yes, and their entire faction is built kind of around where they can keep a card, a 5th card they can use. But Poison Blade, Shield Snoop, Artillery Strike, Poison Tooth, those cards, what they do is allow any faction to have the advantage of a 5 card limit without the need of having that written down somewhere, right?
Right,
Without
yeah.
the uh, for example, like plus
You
artillery
don't
strike,
need a
poison
shield
tooth.
and a snooper if you have the shield
No,
snooper. So that buys you like
yep,
an extra slot in your hand.
and people don't know it, which makes it harder to. Uh,
Because of course,
yep.
having a perfect hand allows you to technically, theoretically, in any battle, have the right matchup of cards.
Mm-hmm.
But so you're theoretically winning every battle, but the downside is that you don't have any X factor. You don't have, a Hajer you can pull out to reach a stronghold that you wouldn't normally be able to get to, or you don't have a
Yep.
truth trance that could win you a fight. So you're
Or you
theoretically winning any fight, but you don't surprise anyone. You don't have any
yep.
surprising moves you can pull off. But being able to do that and theoretically win any fight,
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest strength. That's why a 5 card hand limit is so good.
And that's the difference between the Atreides and the BT massively in their playstyle. Atreides wins when the odds are small, when the information space is reduced. It's as Atreides gets more and more info mid game, but what every pockets is, what's on the board, how much spice everybody has. Atreides win chances go up. BT, the Banned Laxo, are a faction that thrive on chaos because their face dancer mechanic is just that pure unaltered chaos. That is the Poison Blade, Shield Snooper, Poison Tooth, Artillery Strike, and later on the Richess Stoneburner. Because yes, uh, you can keep your own trader card, right? If you are dealt a safe leader at the beginning of the game and there's BT in there, there are so many experienced players that I talk to that pick their own leader as their trader card. And as BT, that sucks because but you also realize you just by playing BT, you deny those experienced players the potential of a trader call.
Right. Well, let's move on to the next question. I actually think the next question shouldn't probably take too long.
Yeah,
The question after, I think,
we've
is
been taking a
pretty.
long time on the first part, but I honestly think this is some
Well, no.
really good info. So I like it.
It's okay because he kind of touched on some things that are going to come up later. All right. So question number two. Do you have any type of allocation strategy in regards to how you're going to spend your spice for bidding, how much you're going to spend for combat, how much you're going to spend for shipping, revivals, bribes, et cetera, or do you just kind of play it sort of as it comes? Or like if you're looking at 10 spice, so you're going in, we're past bidding, we're past revivals, you're any one of these three factions, you've got 10 spice, all things considered equal, do you have any like specific sort of spending strategies?
That's well, as Emperor, you don't have one, right? As Emperor,
Okay.
your spending strategy is really different because you just get money, um, um, like willy nilly, depending on how people are feeling. So you don't really have one except shipping the movement. It's just hey, I have 20 spice, and I could use for shipping the movement. So that's as the Emperor, you just go on a phase by phase basis what your budget is for that phase and
Mm.
how much you're willing to invest, right? As the Benetalaxu, it is extremely hard uh, to budget because your budget is very fixed. As in, you have you get like 6 spice a turn from the tanks. So in that sense, you can say whatever I didn't spend of that 6 spice, I can spend on bidding, or I can just say I'll the 6 spice I get during the Talaxu tank phase, I spend on shipping movement. The rest that I collect, either by leader kills or spice collection or other ways, that's what I use to buy cards. And as a tradies, it is hard because your what you bid on card is what you want to it's just really specific. Like I don't want that faction to get that card, or I want to bid 5 on these wordless cards to make the Emperor or the Harkonnen or anybody else spend 1 more, so they think it's a good card and they waste a lot of spice, but then you end up with a Harvester in your hand, right? Because they didn't take the bait.
Yeah, Atreides is
Mm.
such an
Yeah.
interesting faction with that respect because like your main power with the whole looking at cards thing is centered around the bidding phase. So like as Atreides, you never want to be claiming Chom because that means you're basically excluded from the bidding phase entirely. And since your power really hinges around the bidding phase, that means that, you're nerfing yourself quite heavily.
Now you can go as a trader, you can go to Chom, you can go to that level, but just do note that it just means this turn you're weaker. This turn you're not participating in bidding. This turn you're only that's the turn where you sell the info. Maybe that's a good way to sell it. I sell info when I need spice. I don't sell info when I have the spice in my back pocket to play games with. Uh,
Oh,
one
interesting. So you use it as like a catch up on funds mechanic, not necessarily let me try to get ahead of the non-economic faction.
No, it is really like
Ah.
if I have a surplus of 10, 12 spies, that's when I'm stingy in selling info, unless I'm trying to build a relationship with an ally. Let's say I'm trying to get somebody like the Emperor cozying up to me, so we might have an alliance further, in which case I do sell them info, or of course, with the Ixians, you always want to try and cozy up. That's my opinion. I want to cozy up to the Ixians, so we don't have a race to the bottom. But yeah, um, so budget wise, one hard rule: always leave 1 spice for shipping. Like
Yeah.
that's an extremely hard rule I have. Always leave 1
Okay.
shipping.
Especially for Tleilaxu. especially.
Yeah.
Because, like, 1 spice, 12 spice, 200 spice, you know, as long as you have at least one, as long as it's not 0, you can force a battle. And in a battle, anything can happen. But if you have 0 spice, nothing happens.
Right. Unless you're the
Because
Freeman, but
Yeah.
they're kind of the exception to the rule.
Because remember, there are phases to the game. I consider there are a few phases to the game. Early
Yeah.
game
Don't be
is
mistaken.
like
Phases, in addition to the normal idea that, like, bidding phase and
yeah,
revival phase and whatnot, uh,
ebb and yeah. There's late, mid, early, and those go to each other because there are 3 major resources in this game that aren't spice. If that makes sense. There
yeah.
are treachery cards, and normally, unless you have some weird expansion shenanigans or faction adventures, in a 10-turn game, per player, you have a max of 10 treachery cards. If that makes sense. Like,
Yes.
so once a turn, so at turn 4, for example, if nobody fights, nobody does anything. In shipment and movement turn 4, everybody has a full hand of cards.
Yeah.
If it went well. If somebody overspent, somebody underspent, somebody like sometimes this isn't the case, and there are not 4x6 treachery cards in the game, but it's a really limited
Plus, of course,
resource.
the starting 6. So, I mean,
Yes,
technically, that's turn 3 is when everyone
turn
guaranteed
3,
has a
yeah,
full hand, including Harkonnen.
right, including Harkin here. So, as if you assume that, right, like that in 3 turns, everybody got 1 wordless card, which or something, then maybe around turn 4 is my feeling. Usually, people start having full hands of cards. So, as somebody like the Emperor, you need to engage in early game combat, because if you get to a stale mate in turn 4 where nobody is buying cards, everybody has a full hand, it will last this for like another 4 turns before then guild wins, basically. So as the Emperor, your early game strategy is don't get into a full hand scenario. Don't get into a scenario where there are only 2 or 3 cards up for bid. Try and make sure somehow that every round people are bidding on cards. This as a
Okay.
Atreides, your goal kind of early game is to figure out what the buckets are. Figure out who's weak and capitalize on that. Because if you're not abusing your knowledge, you're not using it. Like, let's say,
Yeah, you can't spell using without abusing, or the other way around,
indeed,
I guess.
if like the Atreides and the Arconan, right? They're the 2 base factions that have 2 free revival. So you want to use your free revival every single turn, right? Because if we go back to this like situation, right, where we're on the board, like we have Emperor starts with 25 virtual troops. Atreides starts with 20 virtual troops. But if you start counting the free revival the factions get as virtual troops, then in the long game, right, in the mid game, Atreides has an advantage, because after 5 turns, they have this 5 extra troops they gotten from revival the Emperor had to pay for it.
Right. That is to say that the
Yeah.
Atreides have 2 free revival, which means that in 10 turns they get 10 forces. Sorry, not 10 turns. 5 turns they get 10 forces for free. 2 times 5. Whereas Emperor only has 1 free revival, so in 5 turns they only get 5 forces. And so the difference is 2 spice per extra force. So 5 extra forces
And
Atreides gets that Emperor doesn't.
yeah, Now, of course, that's not the entire story because the Emperor can pay for that spice, but then they are paying the BT if the BT is in the game, so that complicates the balance. But it just gives you a rule of thumb that if you have free revival, use it or lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it sucks, right? Because if I have 2 free revivals, still means you have to ship the force. It still means you have to spice them. Still means you have to risk leaders in those fights, which is another very limited resource you have. And I've been burned a lot by just losing leaders when you're scattered all over the board, and some faction decides I've got enough information that I can beat you in 3 fights. Let's go kill your leaders, right? And then you're down, or at least
Yeah,
down in a situation.
I'd love to talk to Ronald actually and see what the percentage of winners that have triggered their 5 leaders dead so they can start revival is. Because
I
it's very rare where you have triggered your leader revival thing and you're actually in a good spot. Like
Yeah,
I
one
can't
of the
imagine that's
traps
a very high percentage.
people fall into, in my experience, is not willing to risk the last leader, which
Mm.
is silly, because uh, if on turn 6 you have 1 leader, if you don't kill that leader on turn 6, you will have 1 leader for another 4 turns.
Uh-huh.
However, if you kill your last leader on turn 6 in a Tron fight, on accident, in a last gun shield explosion, right, whatever way you think you can get it done, by turn 10, you will have had the option to revive 4 other leaders.
Yeah, personally, once I've lost 2 leaders and I'm down to 3, uh, I'm starting to think about if I want to revive. And the moment I've lost 3 leaders, my objective is now get the other 2 killed so I can start reviving. Because,
Yep.
if you want to win the game solo, you have to win 3 fights in most cases. And allied, it's probably 2. So the moment you lose 2 leaders, you've gotten rid of the chance of having a traitor and playing a different leader. Once you're down to only 3 leaders, and let's say you're trying to win solo, you have to play every single leader you have. So you just have to hope that you don't play the traitor against the person who has it. And
You know,
that's the biggest thing about leaders is having enough to dodge a traitor.
Which is one big
that's a
reason why I really should emphasize, don't pick your own leader as a safe if BT is in the game. I know people hate face dancers, but the trader mechanic offers you something that you just lose, because just by making a good BT player realize this and make sure that leader is dead and go out quickly. Uh, they don't really,
so let's.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, because you had mentioned winning solo or winning with an ally, I figured it would be a good time to segue into the next question. We're probably going to have time for 2 more questions
Yeah.
with the in-depth discussion that we have, but I'll compress some of the extra ones kind of into one so that we can kind of cover more ground. So,
Mhm.
speaking of allies,
Yep.
Mallister, what are some considerations for when and who to ally with versus when you should stay by yourself? Because I know that this is kind of a big debate, like in the forums amongst, like more experienced players. Some guys, if an early nexus happens and the board's looking right, or if, there's a juicy alliance possibility, they're not, above throwing it out saying like, hey, listen, I feel like if we ally now, we can, really take a strong foothold. We have advantages over such and such and such. And then other people are like, nah, I kind of want to sit back and wait. So, what are some considerations for you?
All right, I'm going to, for sake of time, ignore early game alliances because those are random. They don't happen that often. Well, I mean, they
I mean,
do,
the
but
question is,
usually,
do you by vow like Krell not ally on the second turn?
um, it's not a hard foul if the board has to move. If nobody on the board allies, uh, turn 2, I don't ally either. Um, but the reason why is because it's a game of burning resources of your opponents. So I always think, if I ally this person, can I force the other half of the board to burn resources more than I personally, not as a alliance, I personally have to give up to burn the resources. For example, as Fremen, it doesn't cost you anything to ally. Like, all you give to your ally is 3 free revival. They would So you're helping your ally, and hopefully this incentivizes your ally to be more risky in his move, more risky in their plays, and hopefully this cost the other group of the board. And as you know, as to Laxu, if you ally somebody and you happen to have their face dancers or something, right, you can like revive their leaders for free and then break alliance or something, shenanigans. You do a lot of shenanigans, by the way, with Laxu, which is why I love playing them. Not playing against them for most part, but you know. And as the emperor, it's hard because like people usually expect the emperor to pay for everything, and that's is a double-edged sword, right? Because every every time you allies the emperor, that is one faction out of the game that isn't giving you his or her spice. So you really
So
have, yeah.
can I pause you right there and ask? So I've seen a couple people do the bidding advantage a couple different ways. Some are
Mhm.
I will pay for it, but you must show me the card. Some people treat it like guild shipment, where it's like I will fund half of the card, but I'm not going to pay for
Mhm.
it fully. For the reason you just stated, because it's like, listen, I still need to get my income, unless it's like a game winning kind of situation. If you're the emperor, do you have any specific, like, okay, I've allied with such and such, like, what is your policy with your ally in regards to like
Uh,
helping them get the cards?
my
And I
policy
will
is
real quick, I will
show.
say, like, this is all important because as Emperor, the only faction with a better alliance ability than you, your ability to give free cards, is the Bene Gesserit and their voice.
Yep.
It's very
Uh,
interesting because as Emperor, you ally with people only for their ability to help you win. Because your
yep.
ability is one of the best in the entire game.
I am of the opinion, show and tell, because if you're paying for a card, right, you want to know what they get so that you can direct them, because you're the imperial master chief. You're you don't you have that big advantage, Jada just called, where you can, like, the best advantage besides the voice, where you can buy people free treachery cards. You also have this amazing ability to revive 6 forces, give double their their revival, and ship their forces without it costing them much, right? So in theory, a emperor ally can go down to a planet with 3 forces, play 2 treachery cards, right, and maybe a cheap hero, and be not lose anything, right? Because that's all they got from the emperor. Like, they got 3 extra free revival. They got like 2 or 3 treachery cards from the emperor, and the shipment is paid for, the dialing is paid for, and as the emperor, hey, that's nice because you're burning somebody else's resources, and the only thing you're burning is space. And
Right. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
so, as the emperor, your job, if you're going to subsidize your ally by giving them free cards, giving them a free shipment, is force them to use it. Force them to show you like what cards they have, and give them incentives to ship down and burn their troops, their leaders, and their treachery cards on fights. Because one thing you realize once you start running games with the one use poison tooth, the one use artillery strike, and the other in the Lasco shield combo, is if you play an entire game with poison tooth in your hand, you're not playing correctly. A card needs to be used as the emperor. As the emperor, get those cards out, play it, because by forcing your ally to play their free treachery cards against your combined opponents, those opponents will either lose leaders, lose their treachery cards, or and you know lose troops, which means maybe later on you can break the alliance with this person once their entire leader, all 5 of the leaders are in like the tanks, when like all their treachery cards are gone because they thought they would just get another full hand next turn, right? Then you can like maybe break it, or maybe you already won. It depends on how it goes, right?
Best
Right.
way to keep the
So
blade
so to
sharp is to use it.
Which is one of
it
the very few times I've broken an alliance with an Emperor player, is when that Emperor player refused to kill his last leader on turn 6 whilst having a poison tooth in hand.
mm,
I've had
Emperor is super interesting as a faction just because their alliance ability is fundamentally something that hurts them when they use it. Most abilities, it's just free, like the Fremen letting you not die to a sandworm and getting extra free revivals. Like, it doesn't hurt the
yep.
Fremen to do that. But as the
Mm-hmm.
Emperor, every spice that you subsidize for your ally is a spice you're not getting. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting. You have to play like super defensive as the Emperor. You cannot let anybody take advantage of you because the number of times I have seen someone win a game of Dune by allying with the Emperor, filling their hand up, and then allying with someone else and winning directly that turn, it's
Yep.
crazy. It's probably like at least 40% of games. Like, that's the best way to win, is to abuse the Emperor and ally with someone else.
Which is why a good Emperor knows you have to like give them spice to ship, right? You have to get them on the board. You have to get them in fights. You have to get your ally fighting your pallets on your behalf. That's the best way. And always get card knowledge of like what they get from your, so you can go to them. I've seen what you got, man. Like, you got that cheap hero, right? Get rid of it. Go there, fight, get rid of the cheap hero, so you can buy more cards, right?
Yeah.
That's the
this
pitch.
is
That's the pitch.
I will say this is probably the most like Shaddam thing I've heard in a long time, which is I will fund your war efforts just so long enough that you prove yourself worthy, and the second that you prove yourself inefficient, we will throw you to the sands and we will find somebody else. I really like it. Okay,
Yeah,
so
no,
we're
I
gonna
just gotta say, I gotta butt my big head
go
in
ahead.
here for a
Go ahead.
minute. Yeah, I think I find it so cool that one simple advantage where you read it and you don't necessarily think of the Emperor from Dune, kind of like how when you read the Adventures of the Voice, you think of either the Bene Gesserit or the Jedi from Star Wars. It's not a
Mhm.
very evocative ability, but it instantly, once you put it in the meta of competitive Dune, it immediately feels like the actual Emperor from Dune. Because again, you look at the first book and they have the whole gambit with the Harkonnen and funding their
Mhm.
war effort against the Atreides. And in lore, in the Brian books, they did the same thing with the Atreides with the whole Sardaukar loaning. Like, you got to admit, the Emperor, for such a simple faction, having only two abilities, one of the most evocative factions in the whole game, which is pretty
Mhm.
impressive.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I do think that he's kind of been pigeonholed as a very like simplistic faction, but I think Dune is such a, on the table and above the table game. It's very dynamic. So it's like the relationships that you build with the players you're playing with, the alliances, the deals, the bribes, et cetera, all that comes into play. And the simple fact that, he has such flexibility makes him like such an attractive ally to have and such a, kind of ferocious opponent to be playing against. And
Uh,
speaking of which, I'm
mhm.
gonna just for the sake of time, I'm gonna move on to the last two
Yep.
questions. I'm gonna
Do it.
condense them into one. All right. So in regards to making deals, we kind of talked about this a bit earlier with the Atreides. So what are you looking to achieve? And you kind of already answered this, but what are you looking to achieve in regards like when you make deals? Um, is there specific wordings that you tend to use just to make sure that you don't get like double crossed or someone's like, oh, well, you didn't say it this way, so haha, like I get to get out of, what you were intending. Um, and then what factors determine who you decide to try to bribe and who you decide to make deals with?
Um, so as a person, especially if you're Atreides, because you have such an oversized influence on just a really specific part of the game, uh, you make deals that do two things. One, it you sort of tell the attention of what you are planning to the board, right? Hey, wanna like just do 50-50 on this spice flow? Hey, you know, uh, if we both block an Arcane, right, then um, they can't go for a win. Whilst so that's hard. It's deals are hard. They're a major part of the game, and it really depends on both parties because both parties need to understand the deal they're going into, and both parties need to get something out of it. It's kind of really all about contract law. Is a deal isn't valid unless both parties understand what the deal is, and a deal isn't valid unless both parties gets something out of it. Mhm. Don't offer something that's detriment that's obviously detrimental to the other faction. Don't
Hmm.
uh, uh, don't offer something that you don't fully understand the implications of, especially turn order with tech tokens. Make sure there are really like make sure it's clear who gets a tech token because oh my god, so many times it has gone like you have to be the bigger man usually then where like yeah I didn't word the deals on peaks that it has to be this turn only or next turn only, right? And bidding ended early, so now all your peaks are gone, right? Well, we didn't say it either way, right? So it's like it
Yeah, so
happens.
I
It's like
I
this.
remember a game where it was either a Harkonnen or an Ixian, probably an Ixian,
Mhm.
but they accidentally won on the first turn just because of,
No, that was
tech
David. That
tokens.
was me. That was no, no,
Ha,
no. That was the first game I ever played on the server. I was the Harkonnen,
no way.
and there was two people, and they were like, "Hey," they ironically enough had the tech tokens. They're like, "Hey, like, can I come here and throw fights to you, and you don't kill my leaders, and blah 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 blah." And everyone was just getting rid of trash cards. And then I remember I looked down and I was like, "Hey guys, I think I accidentally just won." And everyone's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, I just got these two tech tokens. I'm still in Carthag, and I shipped guys over to Habanya, and that's
Oh,
three, right?" And
jeez.
everyone's like, "Oh, crap, it is." So to your point, Mouse, they're like, yes, that very much can happen because people will get wrapped up in like the other aspects of like, okay, we got to make sure that we're getting rid of these bad cars, and if we can make it to where the Harkonnen isn't stealing leaders, or the Ixians aren't gonna just blow us out. And it's like, sure, I guess, but
The
sometimes you
guild the guild doesn't interject, right? Because if
Yeah.
right.
like if you make a deal to have a throne fight, the guild interjects in between, ships into you. Like you promised money for this thing. Like, did you get the money up front, right? Like,
That's why you gotta
you
only pay when you're about to receive your, what you're paying for. You can bribe
yeah.
anytime. There's no point in time where you can't bribe once setup finishes. So you know what? Pay for your deal when
Joe,
you get the consideration.
let's ignore the inflation token from Joe for
That's true.
when it
That's
comes to
true.
bribes. Let's ignore that one. Like, but yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's hilarious whenever a deal just completely falls flat because I'll pay you 5 spice and you're gonna do this thing later on. It's like, well, you could just make a deal that later on you'll pay the 5 spice and they will do what you
Mhm.
requested. You don't have to pay up front. And
And that's
deals are
fine.
binding, so there's no risk.
Playing with, well, the risk is wordplay. Like last game I played, I made a deal as I believe Atreides with a Fremen. I said, hey, I'm about to collect 8 spice. I will give you 2 of the spice blow, but if you attack the Harkonnen on the other spice blow, right? And all right, they made the deal. They then went to Dracona and said, "Hey, how about a throne fight in Habanjörg? In Habanjörg, all right." They got 2 spies. They only lost 1 force, and I was,
God.
being made the fool, right? Because I didn't work to do correctly. It's like,
Mm.
I remember one of my first games of Dune, the first time I ever played Harkonnen, that's for sure. So probably like third or fourth ever game. I made a deal with someone. Oh yeah, don't ship onto me in Carthage, and I'll do this. And then instead of shipping onto me, they moved into me and fought me. And I was like, hey,
Ah.
well, you know what? Technically, the deal is still upheld. And I beat them in the combat, and it's still the leader. So they really
yeah. And
got their just desserts. But still, wording.
I've had it happen where, as BG, I sold a deal to a faction where I wouldn't use the voice against them on a certain turn.
Oh, and your your ally did.
No, 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 no.
Okay, all right.
Just full stop, no voice, ally or otherwise, and I still beat them because I knew I just had a better hand, so I could
Damn.
sell them that I could make that deal, or flip, flip a deal.
That's a really funny thing about Dune is that like you can intuit so much information based on what people say. Like the fact that the Bene Gesserit are offering you a deal not to use the voice means that you know what? They probably don't need the voice. Or
Yeah,
hey, they're fighting me here and the only way for me to win the battle is if I play my highest leader. Well, shoot. Technically, there's a
mhm.
good chance that my highest leader is actually the traitor, and that's why they orchestrated it that way.
Oh,
Such
that
a
that
such
that
an
is
interesting game in that way.
that is one tip I can give everybody. That's what I always do. If 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 a faction has a really strong leader compared to the rest, like you talk about your guild, his highest leader is two bigger than his second lowest. Same with Stilgar and Harkonnen's Fate, Ralpha, or the Emperor Six, who is one stronger than his five. Keep enough forces there that you win if he does not play Fate. It
Right.
doesn't matter if you have Fate as your own trader. Go there and say, "Oh," and just like publicly count the numbers. Like just say, "Hey," or don't count. Those are beautiful. So I'm gonna win this. I know I'm gonna win this. But I have the shield snooper. I'm gonna win this. That he that's the double speak where does he have Fate as a trader? Does he not have Fate as a trader? Right?
One of my favorite wins of Dune is where someone fought me, and the only way I could win the battle to win the game was by playing my highest leader, which is, you know, bottom layer of Dune is, oh, I'll play my highest and win. Next highest
Mhm.
level is, oh shoot, that person is probably a traitor. And the level above that is, what if they're just bluffing? And I
Yep.
just did it. I played my highest leader to win the fight, and I did, and it was a bluff. They didn't have it as a traitor. That, for all time, one of my favorite wins on Dune is just
Yep.
calling the bluff and it working out. It's just you can't pay for the kind of emotion that you get from that kind of thing.
Which also
Well,
means,
gentlemen,
and then the fourth level above that is turn one. I'm going to make sure Fate is played against as many factions as possible, just to figure out if Fate Rover is a traitor of somebody, because I want to know turn one.
Yeah, especially
yeah,
if you have the Gola in your pocket.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
love that card. Well, Malister, listen, I think we can probably stop it here, man. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. We got a lot of really good information. I think this is one we're probably going to have to go back and re-listen to because there's a lot of in-depth discussion going on here. Do you want to leave us with any final thoughts before we sign out?
Just uh, be, make sure your deals are worded correctly.
Oh yeah,
Noted.
that's the real kicker. Yeah, no, this is a great episode, and I
Mhm.
that's why I was excited to have you on because me and GJ are very play by the heart, fly by the seat of your pants kind of players. But I know you're actually very smart with respect to Dune, so I knew we were gonna get some good strategic insight. And I still will always remember that one game where we were allied and we both had slightly different information, and we both
Mhm.
concocted slightly different plans but didn't talk to each other, and it got screwed up completely. I don't remember which game that was, but I know it's an
Uh,
invitational that's on the channel. That was hilarious.
it
All right.
happens. It happens. Sometimes you can do these really crazy bluffs. If you're BG and you're down on your luck, you think, "Ah, this game is over." Bluffing a prediction play, just
Honestly.
you know.
And nobody who's in my async game listen to this, but I'm currently in a situation where my prediction probably won't happen. But hey, I might be able to bluff it. Might be able to make a bribe for telling someone what turn it is, and then it turns out it was worthless because the turn already passed. So, nobody in my async Discord game watch this part. Shh. Anyways,
Ne- yeah,
yeah, no,
never sell, never listen, never sell prediction info.
yeah,
Never,
and if the
never.
BG is offering prediction info, don't buy it.
Yep.
Well, yeah, this has been a great convo. That's gonna do it for now. So, everyone still watching at this point, thank you for watching, and I'll catch y'all later.